All right, welcome everyone.
My lord.
So let's talk about it. The realities of drug experimentation and addiction. One second.
Okay.
Good evening, shall I say? Welcome to New Pride Agenda's virtual panel series entitled "Let's Talk About It." My name is Jaszi
Hello.
Alejandro, and I'm the
Hello.
community health coordinator here at the New Pride Agenda. And here moderating alongside me is Mother Jocelyn Milan, the program coordinator for the New Pride Agenda. And this portion of our virtual series is entitled "The Realities of Drug Experimentation and Addiction."
Okay.
So tonight we'll be building community awareness with a focus on harm reduction and connecting the community to experiences and resources related to drug experimentation. We will be partaking in an honest and vulnerable conversation while also highlighting community leaders and activists that have kept us safe throughout the years. The purpose of tonight's conversation is to educate other members of the LGBTQ community about the truth behind drug use, to share the personal testimonies of those who've been deeply impacted by addiction, and to enlighten those who may not be privy. People who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer often face social stigma and discrimination and other challenges not encountered by people who identify as heterosexual. They also face a greater risk of harassment and violence. And as a result of these and other stressors, sexual minorities are at a higher risk and increased risk for intentional and various behavioral issues.
There,
So,
there are many ways we are affected by drugs. We are from our lived experience and our needs, the way we see them, the way we see them, or folks who may.
Jocelyn, you're like cutting in and out.
yeah, there's a sound issue.
Thank you guys for joining.
All right, so there are many ways that people are affected by drug experimentation and addiction. We are speaking from our lived experiences in our communities, the way we see them, the way we have survived them, and the way we know other people to have survived them. So we're gonna do some community guidelines real quick for the conversation, just to remind everyone, use one mic. Let's just be a judgment-free space, and try to use I statements and make sure to mute yourselves once you're done speaking, making points. So without further ado, let's just start introducing our panelists. And each of you can share a little bit about yourself. So like what's your name, your pronouns, tell us where you're calling in from, if you have any affiliation, what interests you about the conversation that we're gonna have today. And I can start with one person and we could just go to the right. So I guess we'll start with ladies first, Lady K.
I knew you was gonna do that. Hi everyone, how are you? So I'm known as Lady K, Kenyatta Khan, or Kenyatta Taste is my real name. And this topic has been very important to me because it's currently affecting my life in the form of a federal court case. One in which I am currently being, well, on this coming Friday at 12 noon, I am being sentenced for a conspiracy to traffic, I think, that's the proper title of the charge. And it has been a very devastating and life-altering and scary experience that I would wish on no one, not even my enemies. But it all stems from my drug use and that whole area. I'm originally from Charleston, South Carolina. I lived in New York for like just about 20 years, a long ass time. And I primarily work in nightlife, but also for a fragrance company, infamous fragrance company, out of Nordstrom Central Park, Columbus Circle. That's just a little bit about me. And yeah, I'm open to all questions. So don't be afraid to ask.
Okay, so next we can have
let's go with Taylor.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Edelman. My pronouns are he, him, his.
I am talking to you from the National Harm Reduction Coalition, where I work as the LGBTQIA+ Health and Harm Reduction Manager, which is a lot of words to say that I get to talk about this stuff all day. I get paid to talk about drugs, and I love it because I love giving people information, connecting with the community, answering questions, collaborating. So really excited to be here with everyone. I'm actually here in Connecticut, although my office is downtown Manhattan. I run a program called Lighthouse Learning Collective, which is a space for queer harm reductionists to come together, do project-based work, network, share best practices, all that good stuff. If you want to know more, we can chat offline, but I will bounce it over to Charlie.
Hello, everybody. My name is Charlie Dominguez. I'm an artist and a community activist. And what I have to contribute to this conversation is that I have been affected by drugs since I was a child. I had a stepfather who was a drug dealer. I lived in a drug-infested building with drug addicts who were roaming the hallway and roaming the lobby as I was coming and going to school. Throughout my life, I saw my stepfather and my mother arrested because of it. I also have dated people who have been drug users and substance abusers, and because of it, have been highly affected by their actions and the way that they treated me. And I've carried a lot of trauma behind it. Um, as far as my own substance use and my own substance abuse, it hasn't been to the point of using hard drugs, but I do believe that alcohol and marijuana can still be addictive. And those are my experiences directly, but I'm here to speak more about how your loved ones, your family members, the person that you might be in a relationship with is also affected by substance use or substance abuse of an individual.
Thank you, Charlie. You can pass it on to one of the other panelists, introduce themselves. I'm Kay Went, Taylor Went, Charlie Went, Nigda Mariah. Mariah, you there? We can pass it on.
Hello.
Hey, Mariah, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, first and foremost, hello everyone. My name is Mariah. I used to formerly be in the House of Revlon, but I'm no longer affiliated with that house. Me personally, I'm 46 years old, and I have always had my own dilemmas and battles with drug addiction, along with coming into a family of drugs. And what I would say today, being a growner and older person, I am much better off than I was when I was younger. And today I am looking forward to gaining and listening and also assisting anyone I can along the way with my trials and tribulations.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mariah. And last but not least would be, as a panelist, would be Rob. Rob, can you introduce
Good evening,
yourself?
everyone. My name is Rob of Vasilarakis. I'm known in certain circles as simply Rob. Y'all can just call me Rob.
Okay.
My pronouns are he, him, his, although I have been known to answer the girl, right? And my interest in this discussion is that first and foremost, I am an addict in recovery. Just for today, I have 2 years, 8 months, and 22 days clean. I do use 12-step modality at this stage of my recovery, but I am an old school harm reductionist, right? And so I do it. I apply it in my work. I apply it in many areas of my life, but I also I also wanted to, I don't know, I feel like I want to say this or need to say this, that people have a tendency to think that it's either harm reduction or 12-step, but harm reduction is a spectrum. right, of reducing the harm. And 12-step is absolutely part of that spectrum, right? And so, you know, people tend to separate the two. And for me, the importance of harm reduction is that, you know, my recovery has been a journey, right? You know, my surrender has been a journey, and you know, I have taken steps outside of the 12 steps to arrive where I am in my recovery today, right? And so there were things that I wasn't ready to do before, and or ready to commit to, or unable to commit to. And so I did, you know, I've done my recovery in stages, and I feel that, you know, harm reduction absolutely saved my life, you know. My drug of choice is crystal meth, which is the drug that brought me to my knees. However, I've tried pretty much everything under the sun. I think the list of drugs that I have tried or experimented with far outweigh the ones that I never got to. So I hope never to get to them, because at this stage of the game, like I have, you know, when we talk about clean and serene, that is absolutely where I am in my life, and I'm so grateful that I am where I am today, because I lived my life from crisis to crisis to crisis, mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical crises, you know, and I feel like having surrendered this time around has really allowed me to know peace and serenity for the first time in my life, and I'm 50, right? So I finally got to know that. I finally got to experience that at 49, you know, so which is, you know, I was a year in. So it works if you work it. And, you know, I'm just here to share some experience, strength, and hope, and from both my professional and my personal life. And, you know, however I can contribute to the conversation in the spirit of wellness, spiritual, emotional, and physical wellness. That's all I got.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. Those are our panelists. Thank you for the introductions. We're gonna just go right into the panel discussion now. Each question will be directed to each panelist, and I will choose the first person to answer each question, and then we can just pass it along the way we did with the intros, and to the next panelist. So these are the discussion questions. I have about 6 or 7 of them, and we can just go right in. So we can start with Taylor with the first one, but I would say, can you talk about the way that in which drug use and drug addiction may impact one's mental health and mental well-being? We can start with Taylor and pass it around.
Yeah, sure. I'll definitely leave time for other folks. But I think the biggest thing I would say, especially as someone myself who's trans, and there's like a pressure, right, to fit in or pass or, you know, look a certain way aesthetically. I think there's a really big kind of pressure to maybe experiment to fit in with groups. And I know in my experience, I was in spaces where things maybe could have gone awry, you know, maybe could have used certain things around me. And, you know, in my space, I didn't really experience too much of that. However, I know a lot of people work with a lot of people that actively use. And what I will say to Rob's point too, the beauty of harm reduction is abstinence is not going to be for everybody, right? 12 steps not going to be for everybody. That's really, truly what harm reduction is. It's meeting that person where they are, but giving them the tools they need so that when that time comes, if that time comes, they're good to go, right? And part of harm reduction too is that mental health care, is that gender affirming care, because I believe that to be truly part of mental wellness and mental health. So that's kind of my piece, because I'm really interested to listen to other people's stories, but that's kind of what I'll say for me. That's the biggest connecting point, is getting people to realize that it's not just giving someone a new syringe, right? Or a fentanyl test strip or Narcan. It's truly linking people to care, to other services that they need and they want. It's not us saying you must go to X, Y, and Z place. If they're not ready, they're not going to listen to you. It's not going to work at the end of the day.
Okay. Thank you, Taylor. We can pass it on to one of the next panelists. And
Sure.
just to remind you, the question is, can you talk about the way in which drug addiction may impact one's mental health and mental well-being?
I will pass it over to Lady K.
Yeah, I'm super excited to answer this question because it's just an awesome question to answer. No, Well, as someone who suffers from severe depression, I must admit that drugs most definitely played a part in it. And the idea, or maybe the fact that, like, while under the influence, it made me feel grander or momentarily grander or ignorant, not ignorant, but like it kind of blindsided me. Like it was very like, I wasn't really aware of what was happening, but I was aware in a sense. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it made me, being under the influence allowed me to live a life where I wasn't actually living a life. It was merely surviving, but just going with the flow, connecting with people that I wouldn't ordinarily connect with, being able to like open up and do things and, you know, talk to people that, to be quite honest, I am a very shy person. Like I spend most of my time alone because I just feel better that way. And although that's not healthy, but that's just how I've always been. Like I've had a lot of past traumas that were like devastating traumas that like, you know, altered my way of thinking of human connections or building connections with anyone. So drugs allowed me to like open up a lot, where as I think otherwise I probably wouldn't have, but I hadn't given it a chance to, or given myself a chance, my sober self the chance to open up and do the same things that I was doing under the influence. So
when it comes to mental health and drug use, how do you think it impacts one's mental health?
It most definitely impacts a person's mental health and as well as physical health.
Okay. With the kids, you can pass it on to the next panelist.
Charlie? You're muted.
Charlie, are you there?
Charlie, you're muted.
So then we can go on to Rob or Mariah.
Or Mariah.
Do you hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Oh yeah, we hear Charlie. You can hear Charlie. Same question, Charlie.
So what I want to say about mental health is that if you're already struggling with your mental health because you're, you know, LGBTQ and you feel ostracized by society, or you might have issues with your home life and drugs are what's making you feel temporarily well mentally, physically, or, you know, socially, what can happen is that the very drugs that you're using to get your momentary fix is also ruining your brain cells and harming your overall mental health in the long run. So what's happening is that you're already struggling with mental health issues, and then you're turning to something that is further deteriorating the wellness of your mind. So for me, seeing it, witnessing it, and experiencing it, okay, it leads me to believe that there has to be a higher level of assistance to mental health in our community overall. That also includes people who struggle with addiction, struggle with substance use, struggle with identity issues, because like she was saying, it's something that makes you feel grand for the moment. It gives you this delusion of grandeur. It gives you this excitement for the moment, and you feel great and you feel social, able to go out there and be these that you want to feel and be. But then when you come down from that high, you're back to that mental unwellness, if you understand what I mean. And I see it happen so often. And a lot of people, when they're on whatever substance that they're using, don't see themselves the way other people see themselves. They don't see over time the deterioration that's happening to them. And I think it's important for those things to be brought into the light without judgment, but at the same time with a level of accountability and truth to what's going on. and I can
Thank you,
pass
sir.
it to the next panelist.
Yeah, there's Mariah and Rob. They were the two that are left to answer the first question. Whichever one.
Okay, you want to repeat the question again?
I'll repeat the question again. Sure. The first one is, can you talk about the way in which drug use, well, drug addiction may impact one's mental health and mental well-being?
I must say, on accountability for myself, I don't want to speak in a zone where I'm allowing or supporting drug use. But what I will tell you, I have gotten better over my years of wanting to involve substances with me getting more educated. And like the last guy just said, with the right kind of support and the right kind of people that will allow you to feel more better than how you maybe felt when you were stoned or intoxicated. I am not in that lane of where I used to be when I was in my 20s, where every day I wanted to get stoned. And I'm gonna tell you, the only reason it would help me is great friends that I've had in my life that allowed me to let me be me. And I chose to grow rapidly on my own accord. And the reason why I'm much better today in talking about substance use is because as we do get older, we do realize like maybe what was for you then can't be for you how it used to be. So having this panel and discussion, what has helped me along the way for my own self is having great people to never judge me. That's how I've gotten better with choosing the decisions I choose to make.
Thank you, Mariah. Thank you. And lastly will be Rob. Do you the same question? Well,
so the way that I feel, so I'm an addict who is duly diagnosed. You know, before I identified as an addict, I had first a depression diagnosis, and then later it was depression and anxiety. And in retrospect, when I look back at my cycles, particularly when I was using meth, you know, and you know, I have an understanding of sort of the chemical reaction that happens in your brain, you know, and how using meth sort of flushes your brain with dopamine, right? Like your dopamine receptors go on overdrive, and my understanding is that dopamine is sort of the chemical that your brain produces that you know, that is responsible sort of for your pleasure, your pleasure sensors. And so I recall you know, being extremely depressed, in part, I think, due to a chemical imbalance that was already there, and then also the circumstances of my life. And so then, you know, I would use the meth, and I would get that lift, right? Because meth is an upper, right? It's speed, and you know, I would be off to the races. There were times when things would get really dark. You know, the thing about meth is that it keeps you up for days, right? So, and I don't say, you know, I don't say like it would start with like being up for 2 or 3 days. And towards the end, when I finally checked into a rehab, you know, I was doing like 7 to 9 days because I had started using intravenously. Right. And so there is nothing normal about being up for 7, 8, 9 days without sleeping. Right. And so there's a fallout. There's an emotional and a physical and a chemical fallout that happens when you crash. So for me, I will keep it on the eye. There was some paranoid psychosis associated with my using. There was the crashes were not only like majorly depressive, they were suicidal, you know? And so, so I was really perpetuating this diagnosis of depression and anxiety, you know? I'm so grateful that I got out when I did, because I hear it echoed over and over again in the rooms of, you know, that, and I will say this generically, right? Because it's not just 1 or 2 people. I hear it a lot. I don't know what they're cutting the drug with now. I mean, I know the chemical compounds have changed, but it seems like now the paranoid psychosis is lasting for months after people put the drugs down. you know, and to me, I observe my fellows, my friends, you know, my fellow addicts in recovery really struggle with these episodes of paranoid psychosis, you know, that is stemming from drug use that they were involved in 6, 7, 8, 9 months ago. You know, so I feel like there is absolutely a correlation between mental and emotional health and substance use. And I think that it can really stoke the fire and fan the flames of, you know, of mental health issues and imbalances.
Thank you, Rob. That somewhat brings me into my my next question, where I'm gonna I can start off with having Mariah start answering, then we can throw it around, which is, do you believe drug users avoid seeking medical care due to stigma? And we can start with Mariah. Mariah, you there?
Yes, hello?
Yeah, we're gonna start
Okay.
with you, and you can pass it around
Yes.
to one of the other panelists.
Okay,
The question
repeat
is,
it.
do you believe drug users avoid seeking medical care due to stigma?
I do. I do believe that they avoid seeking medical care when they are probably unconscious of many things, which is their health, which is their excessive drug use, which is their ability to not focus on other things because they maybe be so numb. So that is true. I do believe that a lot of people does do that.
And you can pass it on to one of the other panelists.
Jocelyn?
No, Jocelyn, she's one of the moderators.
Oh,
but
she's
she
one of
was
the
having a
hosts. Okay, I'm
technical
sorry.
issue.
Okay,
So,
I know the people that's
there's
on the
Lady
panel.
K, there's Charlie,
I'm gonna
there's
pass it
Rob,
to
and there's
Lady K.
Taylor.
Lady K.
I got you. Lady K, you there?
Hey, yeah, I'm coming. I'm
Thanks,
coming.
Mariah.
Thanks, Mariah.
Can you
welcome,
comment
beautiful.
on the same question?
Yes. I'm sorry, repeat the question again.
Do you believe drug users avoid seeking medical care due to stigma?
Because of stigma? Yeah.
If so, why?
Yeah.
Or if not, why?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I think it has a lot more, or there's a lot more to answer than just because of stigma. I think it's because they're too caught up with the high.
Okay.
I feel like people, drug users, abusers, whatever, are too focused on the pleasure that it brings that they don't think about it until they ultimately have to think about it. Like there's some sort of, like some physical ramification of their drug usage. Like outwardly, like if it shows that they're using drugs, then they'll like, you know, seek medical care. And that's only in regards of like sexual health. Whereas when it comes to mentally, I think that drug users or abusers, you know what I mean, don't go that route because they believe they don't have an issue with it. Like they believe that they can handle it. And that's just from my own personal, like, you know, experiences with persons under the influence, and even myself in a sense.
They go for seeking care or not?
I'm sorry?
No, they go for seeking care. You're talking about
Like
your own experience of people seeking care.
I only decided to seek, you know, care for my mental because I was kind of like forced to it. Whereas, I mean, I'm born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina. And although I lived in New York for a very long time, like, and knew that I needed to speak with a therapist, I just decided not to because, you know, growing up the way that I grew up, like, we were basically taught to just, you know, handle it on your own, especially being a woman of color. So if it wasn't forced upon me by the court, then I don't think I probably ever would have. And although I've had friends like tell me that I should speak to someone about like the things going on in my life and I could speak to them and such, I just have never thought it out, or I never would have thought it out.
All right. Thanks,
yeah.
Kay. You can pass it on to either Rob, Taylor, or Charlie.
Rob.
Rob. Thanks, Kay.
Okay. I'm sorry.
The question is do you believe drug users avoid seeking medical care due to stigma?
So the short answer is yes. And if and when they do, I think oftentimes for, due to stigma and also shame, we're not always honest. We're not always like fully forthcoming. I'll keep it on the eye. I know I wasn't. We don't want to be, I didn't want to be perceived as an addict, and I was still very much in denial about my reality, right? But I also think that, I also think that there is some serious stigma and a lot of prejudice, towards people, sort of seem like, especially when there's all kinds of health related issues that can happen due to using, and I think that there's a lack of sort of sensitivity and compassion when it comes to people who use drugs, to some degree I think to some degree because there's a lot of unmanageability too, that we create in our own lives, and life becomes really chaotic. And so sometimes, like we miss appointments, or we sell our medications, whatever we need to do to get the next one, because that really becomes the priority. We shoot up and we get staph infections. And so I think that there's this misconception that it's like, this is something that we're doing to ourselves, that we choose to do. And to some degree, yeah, it is a series of choices. But, I believe that my addiction is a disease, that I have a disease. And, and that really influences the choices that I make when I'm not in, actively working a program of recovery. So, so the short answer is yes, I do believe that people, for various reasons, right?
Avoid seeking care.
And lastly, I'll say, the disease had me thinking all kinds of crazy shit, right? So I've been HIV positive since 1993, and I was a long-term non-progressor. So whenever I would finally make it, because I was fucked up. Like I was out there. Like I
It's okay to say that.
everything. I lost everything. Like I lost. Like I lost night to sleep. I lost my ability to show up to work on time. So I lost my job, which means I lost my income, which meant I lost my ability to pay my rent, which meant I lost my place. So I had to put stuff in storage, but then I couldn't pay for the storage. So I lost my possessions. Like I literally checked into a rehab with the life in my body and the clothes on my back, right? And so I say that to say that there was a time in my sort of drug-driven insanity that I would go after like being on these crazy long runs, and I would have an undetectable viral load and a T cell count of like 700-800, and I was convinced that it was the meth that was producing my T cells, right? And so I was like, oh, I don't need meds, right? And so, but the thing also was like, at any given time, like those things can vary. So like, who knows where my T cells or my viral load was in those 3 years that I didn't see the doctor, right? Mm-hmm. So, so there's all kinds of stuff I think that becomes a barrier when you're in your active addiction in terms of seeking
care,
help that you need, the care that you need, because unfortunately the drug and the next one is the priority. And then it doesn't help, when you're trying to get your life together and people judge you and there's stigma.
That's true. No, thank you for that, Rob. You can pass it either.
Before we move on, I just would like to say thank you, Rob, for being so vulnerable in that moment. In order for this discussion to actually reach the people out there, I think that we needed to be open and honest and vulnerable and real. And I just want to say that we appreciate that, and Pride appreciates that, and I think that our viewers also appreciate that. So thank you so much for what you said right now. Rob, who you want to pass it off to?
Can I just say something real quick? Like, I kind of feel that the conversation is leaning heavily towards like crystal meth usage. And I just want to well, from my point of view, I want to make sure that it is included that all drugs, like ketamine, cocaine, now 2C, 3M, all these things, all of those things. Like, it's not just crystal meth, it's all drugs, prescription, and et cetera, too. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just speaking from my experience, and my drug of choice is crystal meth. Like I mentioned before, it's the one that brought me to my knees. But trust me, like, I've been, I'm grateful that I fell asleep last night and not passed out from, from the alcohol that I used. I became, when I put the meth down, and I became a daily drinker. You know what I'm saying? And
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Rob. I just also want to say that Taylor and Charlie haven't answered the question.
Got it. All right. So I'll pass it to Taylor.
All right, cool. Thank you so much, Rob. I appreciate that. And I'll keep this brief because I know we want to keep it moving. But to answer the question, I do remember the question. Yes, I do think that folks avoid seeking medical care. Lack of trust in providers and the entire medical industrial complex that it is, right? Because these systems were not created with people who use drugs, people who inject drugs in mind. They never were, and they don't fully serve our system, in my opinion. There's a huge amount of stigma associated with using drugs. You go in, doctors may think someone's medication seeking when in fact they're truly in excruciating pain. They will refuse to give them their medication, and they'll label them medication seeking, right, in their chart. I've seen it happen. There's a lot of gatekeeping that goes on. And then that, coupled with someone being part of the LGBTQIA plus community, makes it even more difficult, right? We have compounding identities in there. I always tell people I can go to Starbucks, right, and order a venti whatever and put a double shot of espresso in it. No one's going to bat an eye. But if I tell you that I smoke crack 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day, somebody's going to look at me differently, right? But I tell people, and to Lady K's point, everything is a substance, right? Obviously, to varying degrees. When Rob's talking about crystal or tina or meth, right? When someone's talking about crack or cocaine or ketamine or spice, anything like that, they're very different. People have very personal experiences with them. But our policy failures have created this level of stigma. Really, it's the war on drugs that's created the stigma, saying that some drugs are worse than others. And it's kind of arbitrary at the end of the day. When you look at drug scheduling and really get into it, and I won't even go down that conversation, but a lot of this was manufactured and created to create this stigma to make people feel less than. So absolutely, because of that, I think it keeps people from seeking care.
Thank you, Taylor.
Pass it off.
Charlie.
Well, a lot of what I wanted to say has already been said, but I want to leave the conversation.
Charlie, you cut out.
I can't hear you.
Charlie, your screen went black.
Yeah, we can't hear him. I guess we go on to the next question, Jaszi.
Okay, let's move on. If Charlie comes back, he can finish what he was saying. So let's move on to the next question. The next question is, social media and digital spaces have opened the gates towards cruising lifestyles and made hooking up and experimenting more accessible. How have you navigated this change? How can we be more aware of safety when it comes to the party and play scene? And I'll start with Mariah.
Okay. I'm gonna say personally for me, I know that social media is a gateway to express yourself and to be more, to gain more attention for all the things that we do and say. I have tried to use social media as only as a platform to kind of save lives. And I use my own personal dilemmas outside of a camera. I know that social media is so impactful, but the catch 22 to social media is that if we didn't have social media, we probably wouldn't be in tune with how many people that are really out there at home losing control or getting stoned or calling out for help. And I think that we have to be careful when we pay attention or reach out to certain people that's doing that, because we know that social media is a platform for people to hear you, but yet in all, maybe some people still don't want help. They're just doing it for attention. So for social media to be a new platform, I find it remarkable that we can all find out what's going on under each person's umbrella. But until you really make the cry out for help, that's all it will be, is just a cry. So I find it important to not have us as leaders of ballroom ignoring certain cries. So social media is a place where we're supposed to be vulnerable and express, but it's not the place to get the right kind of attention, because it will harness the wrong attention. So I try to use social media the best way I know how, which is, if I'm gonna speak negative, I would just probably not use that platform. I would use that platform to know that my voice will always be heard, and I must be careful on all the things I post up, because anything can be a trigger, let alone substances. So I find that a good thing. At the same time, it's a catch-22.
Thank you, Mariah. Pass it off.
I will pass it off to Charlie, if he's back.
I think he is not back yet.
Okay, I will pass it off to the gentleman with the worthy shirt on.
Thank you, Mariah.
Mhm.
I'll simply say that social media, seek and you shall find. Like, social media, you will find anything that you want to find, any aspect of, any culture you will find, you will seek it, you will find it. Apps, like for my own recovery, for my own sanity, because it is one of the ways that my compulsion shows up. Like, I've had to get rid of the apps, and if I compare the virtual space to a physical space, I would not enter a building where, if there were 50 apartments and I knew that out of the 50, 40 of them, people were actively using drugs, I would not go into that building. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's, for me, that's like, I can't do that to myself. So, I have a similar feeling about apps. I feel that 9 out of 10 profiles are people using, whether they advertise it or not. So I'm off the apps. In terms of social media and my and cruising, like, sometimes I, there's flirtation or hooking up stuff that happens on social media. Not so much for me, but it depends on the situation and the interaction, whether I decide to, give it any play or not. I will say that I'm very open. I'm an open book on my social media. And I did have one situation where somebody who obviously was following me and knew my story went in my inbox. This was in my first year of recovery, and was like, you know what? I would get you fucked up and have all kinds of sex with you. And, I don't know if they were using, obviously, if they're offering to get me fucked up, the assumption is that they were using too. And so, maybe somewhere along the line in my journey of recovery, I will find some compassion for them. But I still, even thinking about it right now, I still have a resentment. And so, I wasn't going to engage in a back and forth with them. So I just blocked them. I blocked them on the Facebook medium, like that's where they came at me. And then they started coming at me on the IG, platform, and I blocked them there as well. Because, engaging in a conversation with them or in an argument or in a discussion, will do nothing for me. Clearly to me, like, the devil is a liar, and anything that will jeopardize my recovery, I will just block. Like, so that's, the block button, honey, that is, sometimes she could be your best motherfucking friend, honey. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's my piece on social media. And I will pass it to Taylor. Did you go already?
No, I didn't.
All right.
That's perfect. Thank you, Rob. All I'll really say before I pass it off to Lady K is that social media is a super powerful tool, right? Like everybody's been alluding to, and with it comes a lot of misinformation, right? You put whatever on there, and sometimes Instagram will try to take it down, shadow ban you or whatever, but there's still a lot of stuff that kind of creeps through. Personally, I manage a couple different social media accounts, particularly kind of like harm reduction, public health focused, with really the sole purpose of educating those in the community. And I take that super seriously because I want to make sure that we're saving lives, we're giving people accurate information, we're giving them tools that they can use themselves or with their community or with their family members. And it's also important for folks to know how to vet certain sources. Like, don't just repost anything because somebody says it's true, right? So mainly, like I said, I use it to connect people to resources, whether, someone's like, hey, where can I get, clean syringes, a syringe service program, providing information on maybe different routes of administration, snorting, smoking, how to booty bump, right? If someone's like, I can't find a vein, and I'm like, let's try this. It's all about reducing the harm. And it can even be used for mutual aid requests. Someone's like, hey, I'm trying to throw a fundraiser. I'm trying to get hormones. I'm trying to do this, trying to get food, throwing those things up. I've used apps, cruising apps, Grinder, Scruff, all those different apps to connect with community members, leave harm reduction supplies in well-trafficked areas, and making sure to not be intrusive, but just leaving a little something behind, because you never know who's going to pick it up. You never know if one person gets a condom, a dental dam, whatever it is, it can kind of flip the script and change the conversation. So a lot of it is from that provider side. I'm a community health worker, so for a long time, and I've done case management. So a lot of it is on the flip side of providing some services to the community. I myself have had experiences, I can't say like Rob's experiences on the apps and all that. I've had a lot of people fetishizing me and certain things for being trans. Some people just want trans men, trans masculine folks, and kind of come after you. So that's a whole different thing. But mainly it's really using social media as a public health tool to just get people the information they need. And I think Lady K is next up, right?
Yes. Lady K. Kenyatta.
Sorry about that. There's always something in my building. But I most definitely agree with everything that everyone said. So yes. Continue next question.
Okay, I got you. So the next question is, drug addiction goes beyond the person who is using, but also expands to those closest to them. Can you share with us some of the ways that you've seen drug use affect loved ones, families, and partners? And we'll start with Rob.
Oh boy. So I can speak from both sides of this coin. There's something very, when we talk about character defects, and how the ego, the way the ego flares up when you're using, it's a very selfish disease, right? We become so drug focused, and everything else, it becomes the priority, and everything else becomes second, third, fourth. And when I think of my relationships and how they suffered and the bridges that I burned and the person that I was, like the aspect, like the ugliness, because we all have a capacity for ugly and evil, and and I know that there are things that I did and said that I'm not proud of. The manipulation, the lying. But more than anything, I think that the people that love us and that want the best for us, like genuinely, it's so hard for them to watch us destroy ourselves, and so, where I am in my recovery now, like first and foremost, I do it for me, right? I stay clean for me. But I don't only stay clean for me. I stay clean from my friends and my family, and from my sons. My son is about to have a baby. I'm about to be a grandfather. Like, he's calling me every day. My sister, my sponsees, my fellows, my newcomers that come into the room. Like, they come into the rooms and they can't seem to pull it, maybe a day or two, and then they're picking up again. And so, I get to be a source of, inspiration to them the way that my predecessors have been to me, and so, yeah, so it really, like, every time I know that every time I disappear and I'm MIA, people are worrying about me, and, it's just, it affects my job. It affects my clients when I show up hungover or when I'm crashing. I can't be present. Like, it affects everyone around me. And because I don't half step. Like, I'm either using or I'm not. So yeah. And I'll pass it to Lady K.
You got one more time to pass this over with me. No, can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Drug addiction goes beyond the person who is using, but also expands to those closest to them. Can you share with us some of the ways that you've seen drug use affect loved ones, families, and partners?
Thank you
Doesn't
for
only
such
have to be in your experience. It could be.
Yeah, no, of course. Like, no, I mean, I've most definitely have seen how it's affected many of my own personal relationships, and outwardly, like my friends / associates and people that I've tried to help along the way, how it's affected their relationships with others. It's always, I don't know how to say this. Like, I don't know how to properly answer this, but yes, I know that it affects so many relationships besides like your own personal. And as someone who works in nightlife, and like, I have people around the world like who look up to me, and they say that I inspire them and they aspire to be me, which I'm like, honey, you don't want to be me, because sometimes I don't want to be me. Like, it's tiring and it's exhausting. And even being someone in that light, or there's such a responsibility that it's just, sometimes it gets very overwhelming, and it makes you want to go back to doing the things that you know are unhealthy for you, like just to escape. The way it has affected my family and friends, I couldn't even possibly properly detail the many ways it has affected us all. Like, it has been such a leading factor in so much of my life and in my relationships that it's just, no words. I'm just gonna pass it off to Taylor.
All right, thank you. This is definitely a heavy question. I think a lot of people are feeling heavy about it. The whole reason I'm even here and doing harm reduction work is because I lost somebody that I grew up with to overdose many years ago. I mean, I truly believe that I've been led to this work. You know, that I've been guided to this work because of that. You know, I went to the wake, went to the funeral. We were in our early 20s. I will never forget those families' faces ever. I largely blame that on a lack of comprehensive treatment options, an unregulated drug supply, stigma, keeping people in the dark, keeping people silent. You know, this person never spoke on what was going on. They were constantly just shipped off as a child and sent away. It was never discussed. And one day we show up at their funeral. And so largely I'm here to make sure that we are talking, and I'm so glad to be having a space like this. You know, it's very sensitive for people. It's a lot of, I know we all have our different viewpoints on it, but I think at the end of the day, we're here to truly keep people alive. We're here to express ourselves and be genuine. And I just pray that nobody has to lose a child, a family member, anybody to it. I mean, we lost 108,000 people. And that's probably underreporting. 108,000 people in the last year. That I can't even wrap my mind around it. So yeah, it's incredibly personal. Charlie, are you back? I'll pass it over to you.
You're muted. Okay.
Hello, I'm back, and I apologize for the technical issues. I had to recharge this phone. I don't know what the last question was, but I can, jump right in and speak. So if you can just let me know what the last question was.
Sure. So the last question was, drug addiction goes beyond the person who is using, but also expands to those closest to them. Can you share with us some of the ways that you've seen drug use affect loved ones, families, and partners?
That I see what? Say that again.
Can you share with us some of the ways that you've seen drug use affect loved ones, families, and partners? Like people that you're close to, or have you seen like a friend, experience this with their families?
Okay, speaking from experience on both ends of being a child, seeing their parents go to jail because they're dealing drugs, seeing adults around my neighborhood who I looked up to, who were teachers, who were family members of my peers, dealing with drugs, and it being connected to my stepfather, for example, dealing the drugs, also being in relationships with people who were addicted to several different types of drugs, and seeing how they were deteriorated both mentally and physically because of the prolonged drug use and the prolonged drug abuse. What I find is that holistic care and holistic health is not the priority a lot of times when someone is using to escape. And it is also not in a priority. Or am I frozen or something? Do you guys hear me?
Yes, we hear you still.
Okay. Yeah, it is not the priority for a lot of people to even worry or wonder about how somebody else is dealing with your personal drug use. It is not the concern when someone's priority is the escape, when somebody's priority is needing to feel that high for that moment to get away from whatever is torturing their mind or torturing their soul, their spirit in that moment. And they don't realize how not only is it deteriorating them, mind, body, and soul, but the people that love them, that are around them, are also being affected by their deterioration, because we want to see I want to see my lover excel, and I want to see my lover in his optimal self. I want him to be powerful. I want him to be strong. I want him to be healthy. I want him to be joyous. But because of this drug, everything, the whole opposite is happening. And then in turn, I'm breaking down internally because I'm attached to someone who is letting themselves go. So to be a parent, to be a lover, to be a friend to someone who is not even conscious of what they're putting themselves through over time, is not conscious of what they're putting other people around them who still love them, who still care about them, who don't want to come across judgmental, but want them to take accountability of the things that they're doing to themselves and how it's affecting others.
Thank you so much, Charlie. Jaszi? You're muted.
Oh, there we go. I'm sorry about that. Thank you very much, Charlie. Thank you to all the panelists for sharing as much as you shared and for answering the questions and speaking on behalf of the topics that we presented today for the discussion judges panel. The discussion panel. Thank you all. We're gonna shift gears a little bit and do a second part of let's talk about it, which is going to be, we're gonna have a special guest named Carmelita Cruz from the New York State Office of Addiction Services and Supports, which is Oasis. Nice to meet you, Carmelita. Am I saying it right? Carmelita?
Carmelita.
Carmelita Cruz.
Hi, everyone.
Right, go ahead, Carmelita.
Thanks for having me. So I am the new Executive Equity Officer in the newly created Office of Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at Oasis. Like Taylor, it's a mouthful. I have so this position in this office have existed for about a month. It's very new, but I've been with Oasis for almost 6 years working as an attorney. And prior to joining Oasis, I worked as the Director of Advocacy for Housing Works for almost a decade in the Albany office. Housing Works is a social justice agency born out of the Housing Committee of ACT UP, really focused on serving folks living with HIV and who are homeless or unstably housed, but really had like a large social justice issue agenda. I worked very briefly with the Pride agenda before they dissolved after the passage of marriage equality quite some time ago. So it's really great to be here with everyone. I think it's fitting that we went from the last question to this question, right? So just a little bit of my background. I am the child of a long-term injection heroin user. So I grew up with having that experience, which I don't think growing up I would have said would have impacted my career in the way that it did, right? But obviously it has, because I decided to go work at the agency that regulates addiction treatment for New York. I went there, right? It's a little bit of the history, right? There's this tension between like harm reduction and abstinence-based programs, and addiction treatment in New York has been abstinence focused historically, not just in New York, right? The addiction treatment system has been abstinence focused for such a long time. I came to Oasis at a time when the agency was looking at really making changes. So I got to write a lot of the regulations that stripped away all of the abstinence focused language, which was really exciting for me, and really embracing harm reduction philosophy, trauma informed care, embracing access to medication assisted treatment. So that is a little bit about my background that I wanted to share with everyone before we get started. I'm going to share my screen. I have some slides to share. If I can get them going. I have to say, I'm not like a huge technologically savvy person.
It's okay. It's okay.
Bear with me, and there's a lot of slides here. I'm gonna go through them fairly quickly. A little bit of an overview of the Oasis system. It's one of the largest substance use disorder systems in the nation. We have about 1,700 prevention, treatment, and recovery programs that serve over 680,000 individuals a year, and we directly operate 12 addiction treatment centers around New York State. Those are inpatient addiction treatment programs. The service array that's provided out of Oasis covers prevention, treatment, now harm reduction. We've just created a new Office of Harm Reduction Services within Oasis, which is wonderful, and recovery services. So the prevention framework is really based on risk and protective factors. Our prevention system is very school-based and youth-focused right now. They're really making some changes to expand the focus so that it's not just school-based prevention programming focus and really covers the entire the entire age spectrum. So they're making some changes there. They're creating community coalitions, again, the school-based services, and then a really big, public awareness and outreach component. The treatment system is obviously vast, 1,600 addiction treatment programs across the state, which includes different types of treatment. So crisis services, inpatient rehabilitation and residential services are inpatient programs, outpatient programs, opioid treatment programs are methadone programs. That's what they're referred to in New York State. Harm reduction, like I said, we are creating a new Office of Harm Reduction Services. We're hiring an associate commissioner for harm reduction right now. We're going through interviews. We had a great response, and they'll sort of build the harm reduction program out. Once they're hired, they'll hire additional staff. And they'll go through much of what I'm going through right now, which is really learning all of the different aspects of the agency and how to integrate harm reduction across the spectrum of services that we provide at Oasis. And we're looking at using both state and federal funding that we have to really invest in additional harm reduction programming in the state. So in New York State, harm reduction services are technically overseen by the Department of Health's Office of Drug User Health. We work very closely with them, but they oversee and regulate, syringe services programs, opioid overdose prevention programs, the naloxone programs. We partner with DOH, and a lot of our providers operate those programs as well. But we're really looking at using some of the directed funding that we get from the federal government to really expand access to those services in the state. And then recovery services. We have a great new director of our recovery bureau, Brenda Harris Collins, and she is doing great work with, really expanding the recovery programs that are available through Oasis. We have recovery centers, youth clubhouses, regional addiction resource centers, and a wide array of peer supports that are provided throughout each level of care and each different service system across Oasis. These are two of the youth clubhouses that are in the city. One that's operated by Housing Works in Brooklyn, and then the other at the LGBT Community Center in Manhattan. There's a schedule they have. I think their schedules are publicly available online, and there's a sort of a sample of the programming that they offer. And some of our guiding principles, we have a new commissioner at Oasis, Dr. Chinazo Cunningham. She's a doctor who's provided harm reduction services for 20 years. So she comes in with a very different focus than I think this agency has had before. And I think that's really part of the, making harm reduction a priority and making sure that it's really integrated throughout the agency. making sure that equity is integrated throughout the agency, that we're looking at all of our policies and practices from an equity lens. This is sort of new. It's very welcome within the agency, right? But this is a new direction for this agency and for all of the providers that we oversee. And we're really taking a deep dive into data so that the decisions that we make are data informed. We're going through all of the data collection tools we have right now, updating outdated terminology, figuring out what we collect and where the gaps are and how we can collect more data, and figuring out how we can use what we're collecting now to establish some baseline data points so that we can really work on building out and expanding the work that we do and seeing the impact that we have with some of the new policies that we're implementing. This is the information for the Oasis Hope Line in New York. There's both a telephone option and a text option. The Hope Line is available 24/7 for individuals who are looking for access to services. If they are not already incorporated, they will be very soon. All of the syringe services programs that the Department of Health operates, I know that we were trying to connect all of those services so that folks calling this line, whether they were looking for traditional treatment services or looking for access to their local syringe exchange program, that information would be provided to them. This is a little bit about, the volume that the Hope Line sees. So the Hope Line has been in existence probably for about 8 years now, maybe a little bit longer. And I think, the total contacts increase each year, right? As people become more familiar with this tool existing. The outbound calls here that are about 2,900 calls. This is a newer feature, and it's really like following up with some of the folks who called who were in a crisis situation. So the Hope Line, is not only directing folks to what services are available in their community, but are also following up with those folks that are in crisis. There's a little bit about the language access services. Obviously, the majority of calls are in English. The second highest prevalence for language is in Spanish, but we use a vendor so that individuals are able to identify the language that they need, and then those translation services are provided over the phone. So in terms of overdose prevention and talking through, where folks can get naloxone if it's needed, where folks can get fentanyl testing strips, I wanted to just sort of highlight some of the options that are out there. All of the Oasis programs should be providing those services. Opioid overdose prevention programs, it's much more expansive, right, than just the Oasis system. There are lots of other programs that are doing opioid overdose prevention work. And that's where you can get like naloxone kits for free. The health hubs and syringe exchange programs that are operated through the Department of Health. And then the naloxone co-payment assistance program is for folks that have insurance and are trying to access naloxone. You can go to your local pharmacy and pick up naloxone, and you won't have to pay the co-payment.
Which is also known as Narcan, right?
Yes, which is also known as Narcan. Sorry, it's habit to refer to it as
It's
naloxone.
okay, it's okay.
Yeah, it's also known as Narcan. There are a few LGBTQIA+ policies and trainings that I thought might be interesting to everyone. So I joined Oasis at the end of 2016 and started working with advocacy groups and providers to create a local services bulletin, which is really like a directive to all of our programs to create policies around affirming services for LGBTQ identified patients and clients in our system. Prior to that, we didn't have any policies in place. So this is really things like using appropriate pronouns, allowing folks to choose gender segregated facilities and groups based on their gender identity. So it really created policies within the Oasis system. We have been continuously looking at the language that we use in Oasis over the course of the past, 5 or 6 years. We updated the name of the agency, formerly the Office of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse Services, and really trying to strip out stigmatizing language from our agency name, from our agency, policies, regulations, laws. We updated the agency name to the Office of Addiction Services and Support. We use gender neutral language in all of the policies and documents that we release from the agency. We have specific patients' rights provisions that are applicable to folks that identify as LGBTQ, especially trans and gender nonconforming and non-binary folks around, receiving affirming services in our programs, so that there is the ability for the agency to take action against programs when they are not complying with our regulations and our rules. And then very recently, we released an LGBTQ affirming program endorsement that our programs have the ability to apply for. So, the LSB and the regulations sort of set minimum standards for all of our programs. And then we have additional standards that programs may comply with and obtain a program endorsement. And this was really a way, we would get a lot of questions coming in from the community about whether or not programs specialized in providing services.
I have a question for
Sure,
you.
go ahead.
Should I ask now? It kind of relates to what you were saying before a little bit about when you talked about overdoses and you talked about some of the services that people can receive. But the question was, how has the introduction of fentanyl in the U.S. put people more at risk when it comes to drug experimenting with drugs?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I absolutely can. So fentanyl is being found across the drug supply, right? It's not focused just in opioids anymore. And the issues are that we are seeing more folks overdose. And unfortunately, a lot of those folks are dying. People are dying every day. Taylor mentioned earlier, over 100,000 people died last year. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's why we are looking at ways of, really reaching new communities that don't typically engage with the addiction treatment system. Looking at investing more funding to expand access to programs in different communities. We are, open to as many ideas as we think might work to implement in our system to try and save lives, because it's otherwise the consequences are devastating, right? That's what we're seeing every day.
I believe Taylor has his hand up.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So going off of what Carmelita was saying too, for folks that don't know what fentanyl even is, so fentanyl was first created in the 60s as a biopharmaceutical company. I believe it was Janssen, as a really strong pain reliever. And then since then, we've seen it creep into the drug supply in the United States, probably over the last decade, but I would say like 2014, 2015. And then as Carmelita was saying, it's at the point where fentanyl is in nearly everything. And I do want to let people know that there are some people who elect to snore or smoke or inject fentanyl. The people that we're most worried about are those who we call quote unquote opiate naive. So people that might be using, meth, cocaine, MDMA, other drugs, and then there's fentanyl in the drug and they have no idea that they're using. And there's obviously a higher risk of overdose in those cases. So oftentimes when we're instructing and we're talking about fentanyl test strips, which are very expensive to produce and get in the hands of people, we want to get fentanyl test strips into the hands of those people that have no idea, right? If you're using fentanyl, there's no point in using a fentanyl test strip. And there's also kind of a science to using them as well. Another thing about fentanyl, I do want to caution, we have to debunk this myth a lot. You cannot overdose on fentanyl by simply touching it. I know there are videos out there. Somebody always comes in with a link and says, I saw a cop overdose and they fell over. That's bullshit. Does not happen. You could literally be in a wind tunnel with fentanyl blowing all around you in every orifice of your body. And I assure you, you would not overdose. Like, People have put it in their mouths and their eyes. So that's one thing I want to let people know. And the reason I stress that is because it's so dangerous to perpetuate that misinformation, because it makes it less likely for someone to receive help in the event they do overdose. Because then people don't want to touch them. Like, well, I'm going to overdose. I don't want to touch that person. So I caution people, use your
Very
face
true.
mask, all that. So just know that.
And
Thank you very much for that, Taylor. Thank you.
yeah, thank you
Very
for explaining that, because a lot of people don't even know about fentanyl, let alone know that it is coming in, you know, in like the marijuana that they're smoking, or the ecstasy pill that they take. You know, they just think that that's all that's in what they're using, but with the introduction of fentanyl into the States, yes, it is a possibility that that whatever you're using can have fentanyl in it or be laced with fentanyl. So thank you so much, Taylor.
It's not, I just want to say one thing, because someone's saying in the chat, it's not been confirmed to be in marijuana. There was a whole, and I know this too, because in Connecticut, DPH had to walk their stuff back because they tried to put out and say that there was fentanyl in the weed, which it actually turned out that a bunch of the people that overdosed were using other drugs, right? They were using drugs that were laced with fentanyl. They were using heroin, or they were, you know, smoking meth, whatever it was, you know, snorting cocaine. So I don't want people to freak out about their weed. That's been like a whole point of contention. And this is not to throw shade at anybody. It's just making sure people have information. And I don't want people to freak out, but I do want people to be safe. No, Stephen, there has never, to my knowledge, been a confirmed case of that happening. So
what Charlie is saying is that some people actually lace their weed with it, like
yeah,
on
so
purpose.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I've never heard of a confirmed case. I'm not saying that anybody's not saying the truth, but I've never heard of a confirmed case of it. I'm sure people lace with other things, whatever it is, but to my knowledge, it's not happened yet.
Okay, Carmelita, I also want to say thank you for the slides. They were very informative. Every time I had a question, you came up with a new slide and answered my question. And I do believe that you also have more slides. But for a second, I would like to go back to the 24/7 Hopeline slide. I think that one of our viewers wanted to jot down that number. And can you tell us a little bit more about the 24/7 Hopeline? Like, what is the point of us calling that hotline?
Yeah, so the Hopeline was created for folks who were looking for treatment services to call, and a 24/7 line will answer and provide you with information on the providers that are located around you. Over time, it's sort of evolved based on the needs that have been expressed within the state. So there's also the ability, you know, like the Hopeline is staffed by both peers and counselors now. So, you know, folks that just need to talk to someone have the ability to do that. The service array has really expanded. Like I said, if you're looking for a program where you can get Narcan, if you're looking for a syringe exchange program, if you're looking for any of the recovery services, a recovery center, a youth clubhouse, the Hopeline can really provide you with referral information for those programs in your area. And it's not just around, you know, geared around addiction. I think, you know, that's what I've been talking about because that's the focus of this conversation. But Oasis also oversees treatment for gambling disorder. So folks that have issues around, like, you know, problem gambling also have the ability to call or text and find out what services are available to them in their area as well.
Wow, you know, that's so interesting that you actually mentioned that, because, you know, whenever we think of addiction, we always go to drugs or alcohol, but there are also other forms of addiction like gambling. So that is really interesting that you can also call the Hopeline and talk about that. So I actually want to mention before you go on, Carmelita, that we'd like to open the space up for any questions that folks may have for Carmelita in particular, or any of the panelists for that matter. Please use the Q&A function if you're tuned in on Zoom, or type your question in the comments. if you're tuned in on Facebook Live, and we will say them for you. Thank you, Carmelita. Can you continue with the slides?
Sure. I don't think that there are that many left. There's some more information about the LGBTQ affirming program endorsement. I can share these slides for anyone who wants them. My contact information is in here as well. And information about Oasis LGBTQ specific trainings that we have. These are trainings that were already done and are posted on our website. We're working on a new series of trainings really geared toward our residential system right now on a variety of issues that providers have identified wanting more training on and needing more training on. And then this is my contact information. If folks have questions, if you want to reach out and have a conversation, I'm happy to chat with folks.
The Lady K, does she have a hand up? No?
I
Okay, then I'm
did
sorry.
have my hand up, but I think my question was answered. Yeah, I can't think of it right now, but thanks.
Okay. Well, we'd like to thank you, Carmelita.
Hold on. I actually do see questions. People put some questions here in the Q&A.
Okay.
Someone wrote, I also saw that even if it was found in weed, the flash point is higher, so fentanyl would most likely burn off.
Yeah, I can answer that, Jocelyn. So I think that Carter was probably talking about the conversation we were having with the quote unquote fentanyl laced weed. So I had linked an article in there just because I know we don't have time to get to everything. But yes, Carter, in that article, the individual who wrote it talks about how the fentanyl is going to burn off. So even if it did get in there somehow, there's no way that it would be able to maintain the same level of efficacy, meaning that you wouldn't feel the effects of it. It would just burn off. So.
Oh.
And there was also one other question here. So Harriet writes, so I on occasion use magic mushrooms and take trips to Peru to do ayahuasca for spiritual enlightenment, and have benefited immensely from these substances in connecting to the spirituality of my transness. I have never found these psychedelics to be addictive and have only benefited positively from them. Do you have any advice and or concerns about this substance use? I know a lot of other queer people who also use psychedelics for these purposes. Taylor or Carmelita? Do either one of you want to answer that? About psychedelics?
I mean, I think the one.
Up.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Charlie. Yeah, go first.
So as far as mental health is concerned, a lot of studies that are coming up now with ayahuasca and DMT, they're actually looking into microdosing it for resetting people who have depression, anxiety. So it's actually being studied because it does have mental health benefit. They're just trying to make sure that it's being provided in the healthiest format.
Oh wow! So basically, we do use it for we're potentially about to start using it for resetting depression. I actually heard that as well, Charlie.
Can I say a little something? I heard, well, not about ayahuasca or DMT or anything like that, but I heard that they've been doing like this study with ketamine and depression and how the effects and how it is used as something to help people with depression, like get out of depression. There's been a study that's been going on for like years. And I think they're just now like implementing it into like, you know, certain cases.
thank you, Kay. I didn't, well, I guess we find out more about that, when we, maybe for the next discussion, let's talk about it or not. But I know we're gonna have to wrap it up, so for the sake of time of everyone's schedule, I just wanted to, it's about to be 8:30. And if there wasn't anything else, I just wanted to thank everyone. Thank all the panelists and partners for participating, and for all those who tuned in online. Thank you, Taylor, from the National Harm Reduction Coalition, and thank you, Oasis, for the presentation. Thank you, Lady K. Thank you, Mariah, Rob, Charlie. Thank you, all the panelists, for participating and sharing about from personal experience. Thank you to Lisa Crespo, our Executive Director, New Pride Agenda. And if you want to find out more, you can always go to newprideagenda.org, or you can follow us on our Facebook or our Instagram at New Pride Agenda on IG, and www.facebook.newprideagenda.org. .com and Facebook.
Can I just say one more thing?
Sure, Kay.
Thank you. Yes, thank you all so much for I really enjoyed and learned so much during this entire this discussion. But if you're free at noon on Friday, please come show some support for me, for my case, at 111 Center Street at 12 noon. Okay, thank you. That'd be greatly appreciated. I'm stressing out.
Thank you, everyone. Please come out, support each other, take care of each other. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you.